Gentlemen, maintaining a double life isn't about luck or coincidence. It's about precision, planning, and psychological manipulation executed with surgical accuracy. Some women have perfected the art of keeping two men completely unaware of each other's existence, not for days or weeks, but for months or even years. This isn't accidental overlap during a breakup. This is deliberate compartmentalization, where two complete relationships exist simultaneously without collision. Before we dissect these manipulation tactics, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and drop a comment if you've ever discovered you were one of two men being played simultaneously. Your story might help another man recognize the signs before he invests years in a relationship that was never exclusive. Trick 1. The geographic separation strategy. He's just a friend from work. This trick involves keeping the two men in completely different social and geographic spheres so they never have opportunity to discover each other. One man exists in her work life, the other in her personal life. One lives across town, the other near her apartment. One knows her weekend friends, the other knows her weekday routine. She constructs entirely separate worlds with different friend groups, different locations, and different schedules that never overlap. The deception works because men don't typically investigate parts of their partner's life that seem routine and established. If she's always had work friends you don't meet, a gym across town she's attended for years, or family obligations in another city, these become accepted parts of her life you don't question. But the trap is that these separate spheres aren't natural divisions. They're carefully constructed compartments designed to keep you and the other man in isolated bubbles. Notice whether you have genuine access to all areas of her life or just approved sections. Do you know her co-workers, or does work remain mysteriously separate? Have you met her friends, or does she maintain social circles you're never invited into? Does she have entire days or locations that exist in her descriptions, but you've never witnessed? If major portions of her life remain perpetually off-limits, with explanations about boundaries or logistics, those aren't boundaries. They're compartments hiding the other relationship. Watch how she manages requests to cross into these separate spheres. What happens when you suggest visiting her at work, meeting her gym friends, or joining her for family obligations? Does she welcome integration, or does she create obstacles? It's not a good time. They're private about visitors. It would be awkward. Genuine spheres can be penetrated. Manufactured compartments must be defended. Pay attention to whether her scheduling has suspicious rigidity around these separate areas. Does she always see work friends on specific days you're not invited to? Does her gym time happen at hours that would make your attendance impossible? Does she visit family on weekends but you're never included despite the relationship being serious? If her separate spheres operate on schedules that systematically exclude your presence, she's not maintaining healthy boundaries, she's maintaining the other man's access. The psychological mechanism is exploiting the reasonable expectation that partners have independent lives. By establishing seemingly normal separate spheres early, she creates accepted patterns where your absence from certain areas feels natural rather than suspicious. You're not excluded. She's just always had work friends, gym routines, and family obligations that exist independently. Except those independent areas are where the other relationship operates freely. The long-term impact is discovering you've been confined to one carefully managed section of her life, while an entirely parallel existence played out in spaces you were systematically prevented from accessing. The work friends she mentioned weren't friends. One was him. The gym across town wasn't about fitness. It was about geographic separation from you. The family obligations that kept her away on weekends included him being introduced as her boyfriend, while you remained the secret she kept from that side of her life. You weren't her partner with normal boundaries. You were one man assigned to specific compartments, while another man occupied completely different spaces in the same woman's life. Trick 2. The phone management system. I just like keeping things organized. This trick involves creating sophisticated systems for managing communication with two men through separate devices, apps, messaging platforms, and notification settings that ensure you never see evidence of the other relationship. She might have a work phone and personal phone with different men assigned to different devices. She uses specific apps for specific relationships, texting you but using Snapchat with him. She manipulates notification settings so his messages arrive silently while yours appear normally. The deception works because phone management appears as personal preference rather than systematic concealment. People have different devices for work, use various apps for different purposes, and customize notification settings for convenience. But the trap is that her organization isn't about efficiency. It's about ensuring you never accidentally see his name, his messages, or evidence of communication happening parallel to yours. Notice whether her phone behavior follows consistent patterns or changes based on context. Does she silence her phone when you're together, but keep notifications on when alone? Does she position herself so you can never casually see her screen? Does she leave the room to check messages, even though she claims nothing is private? If phone behavior is performatively open in controlled moments, but heavily guarded in others, she's managing what you're allowed to see versus what actually exists. Watch what communication platforms she uses with you versus everyone else. Are you relegated to text messages while she's constantly active on Instagram, Snapchat, or messaging apps that auto-delete? Does she communicate with you through easily monitored channels while maintaining entire conversations on platforms you don't have access to? If communication with you happens on trackable platforms while she's heavily active on apps designed for disappearing messages, she's separating detectable communication from hidden communication. Pay attention to how she responds to unexpected calls or messages when you're together. Does she check who's calling before deciding whether to answer? Does she glance at messages, seem startled or uncomfortable, then put the phone away claiming it's nothing important? Does she step away to respond to communications that require immediate attention, but she won't explain? If certain communications trigger evasive behavior while others don't, you're seeing the management system in action, responding differently to you versus him, based on which relationship is currently present. The psychological mechanism is using technological complexity to create plausible deniability. Modern communication happens across so many platforms, devices, and apps that managing dual relationships has become easier than ever. She's not hiding communication. She's just using different apps for different people, different devices for different purposes. Except those divisions perfectly separate you from evidence of him. The long-term impact is realizing the elaborate notification management, the multiple devices, the various messaging apps, and the careful phone positioning weren't about organization or privacy. They were about maintaining two relationships that would have immediately collapsed if either man saw evidence of the other. Every time she silenced her phone around you, she was preventing his messages from appearing. Every time she used Snapchat instead of text, she was ensuring no permanent record existed. Every time she claimed her work phone was just for work, she was maintaining the device assigned to him while you remained on the personal phone. You were experiencing curated communication, while a parallel messaging relationship existed in spaces you didn't even know to check. Trick 3. The scheduled Tetris game. I'm so busy these days. This trick involves intricate schedule management, where she allocates specific time slots to each man with precision timing that prevents overlap while maintaining the appearance of a full but normal life. She sees you Monday and Wednesday, him Tuesday and Thursday, reserves weekends for whichever man hasn't created suspicion lately, and fills gaps with explanations about work, family, friends, or self-care that account for every hour without revealing the actual allocation. The deception works because busy schedules are normal, especially for independent women with careers, social lives, and personal interests. Accepting that you can't see your partner every day seems reasonable and healthy, but the trap is that her limited availability isn't about having a full life. It's about distributing her time between two men while ensuring you each get enough attention to remain satisfied, but not so much that scheduling conflicts expose the overlap. Notice whether her availability follows predictable patterns or changes inconsistently. Does she always see you on specific days, while other days are mysteriously blocked out? When you suggest alternate timing, does she have immediate conflicts that perfectly prevent schedule changes? Does requesting spontaneous time together consistently result in prior commitments that somehow fill every gap? If her schedule operates like Tetris, where every space is permanently assigned and no flexibility exists, she's not naturally busy. She's managing competing commitments. Watch what happens when you try to extend your allocated time or shift to her unavailable periods. Does she accommodate occasionally, or does she react with unusual resistance to schedule changes? Does she create elaborate explanations for why Tuesday doesn't work, but Monday is fine? Why evenings are impossible, but lunch works? Why this week is completely booked, but next week has one opening? If schedule negotiations feel like navigating a minefield with specific safe zones and numerous forbidden areas, you're bumping against the other man's allocated time slots. Pay attention to her last-minute cancellations and whether they follow patterns. Does she sometimes cancel plans with vague emergencies or sudden conflicts? Do these cancellations happen more frequently during periods when you've been seeing each other more regularly? If she occasionally needs to cancel your time together, particularly when you've had more access than usual, she's rebalancing the distribution when the other relationship demands attention she's been directing toward you. The psychological mechanism is using legitimate busyness as cover for deliberate time allocation. By establishing herself as someone with a full life early in the relationship, she normalizes limited availability and makes requests for more time seem demanding rather than reasonable. You accept seeing her twice a week because she's explained her busy life, not realizing those other committed days are allocated to him with the same explanations about why more availability is impossible. The long-term impact is realizing that every time you couldn't see her on Thursday, he was scheduled for Thursday. Every weekend she was with family included him being introduced as her boyfriend to relatives you didn't know existed. Every evening she was tired from work meant she'd spent the previous evening with him and was recovering. The busy schedule you respected wasn't about her having a full life. It was about her having two relationships that required careful time distribution to prevent collision. You weren't dating an independent woman with limited availability. You were assigned to specific time slots in a calendar that allocated her remaining hours to another man you didn't know was competing for the same resource. Trick 4, the identity customization technique. You know I'm not really into that. This trick involves presenting completely different versions of herself to each man based on what attracts them, what they value, and what they expect from a relationship. With you, she's career-focused and independent. With him, she's traditional and family-oriented. She adopts different interests, different values, different personalities, and different relationship goals customized to keep each man satisfied with a version that matches his ideal partner. The deception works because people do present different aspects of themselves in different relationships, and partners bring out different qualities in each other. But the trap is that her different presentations aren't natural variations. They're calculated performances where she becomes whoever each man needs her to be, maintaining contradictory identities that would be impossible to reconcile if you ever compared notes. Notice whether her core identity remains consistent or shifts based on context. Does she express the same values, interests, and goals consistently, or do they seem to adapt based on what's being discussed? Does she mirror your interests while claiming they're also hers? Does she agree with your perspectives while presenting them as her independently held beliefs? If her personality seems unusually aligned with yours without much friction or difference, she might be performing compatibility rather than demonstrating actual alignment. Watch what stories she tells about herself and whether they remain consistent over time. Does her past stay stable, or do details shift? Sometimes she wanted marriage young. Other times she was never sure about marriage. Sometimes she was close with family. Other times they were distant. Does she describe herself differently in various contexts? Independent career woman in some conversations, nurturing traditional partner in others. If her self-narrative isn't consistent, she's managing different presentations rather than revealing a stable identity. Pay attention to whether she has opinions or primarily reflects yours back to you. Does she express preferences, or does she discover she likes exactly what you like? Does she have established interests she maintained before meeting you, or did her hobbies conveniently align with yours after you started dating? If she's remarkably compatible, without any natural friction or difference, she's performing the customized version designed for you while maintaining a different version elsewhere. The psychological mechanism is becoming a mirror that reflects each man's ideal partner back to him. By presenting customized versions, she ensures both relationships feel uniquely compatible and special. You both believe you found someone remarkably aligned with your values, not realizing she's performing different roles entirely. The version you love isn't her. It's the character she created, knowing what would attract and retain you. The long-term impact is discovering the woman you loved doesn't actually exist. She was a performance customized to your preferences, while an entirely different version existed for him. The career woman who valued independence and never wanted kids was telling him about her dream of being a stay-at-home mother. The adventurous partner who shared your love of travel was presenting as a homebody who valued routine to him. The liberal values she expressed with you contradicted the traditional beliefs she claimed with him. You fell in love with a curated performance while she maintained contradictory identities across two relationships, and neither version was authentic. They were both strategic presentations designed to retain two men who would have left if they'd known her actual inconsistent, manipulative character or discovered she was simultaneously presenting opposite values to someone else. Trick 5. The controlled social media presence. I just like keeping my relationship private. This trick involves carefully managing her digital footprint to ensure neither man appears in her social media or appearing in ways that look single to casual observers while maintaining private accounts, close friends lists, and selective posting that shows each man only curated content. She might post ambiguous content that could apply to either relationship, use strategic cropping that removes identifying details, or maintain completely separate social media accounts for different audiences. The deception works because social media privacy is reasonable, and many people prefer keeping relationships off public platforms. But the trap is that her privacy isn't about avoiding public attention. It's about preventing digital evidence that would reveal to either man that another relationship exists simultaneously. She's not avoiding social media. She's carefully managing it to ensure neither you nor he can use her digital presence to discover each other. Notice whether her social media privacy is consistent or selectively applied. Does she post nothing about her personal life, or does she post strategically vague content that avoids relationship-specific details? Does she crop photos to remove you from images, use angles that prevent identifying features, or post content that appears single despite being in a committed relationship? If her social media suggests she's unattached or carefully avoids evidence of your relationship, she's not private. She's managing perception to maintain plausible deniability to the other man. Watch who has access to what content through features like Instagram, close friends, or private accounts. Does she maintain different access levels for different people? Are you included in some content but excluded from others? Does she have separate accounts you weren't told about? If her social media has layers of access and privacy that segment audiences, she's controlling what different people see, ensuring you and the other man never encounter evidence of each other. Pay attention to how she responds to being tagged or mentioned in your posts. Does she accept tags gracefully, or does she request removal or express discomfort about appearing in your content? Does she avoid posting photos with you while posting other aspects of her life? If relationship content specifically makes her uncomfortable while other content is fine, she's protecting the appearance of being single or available to the other man who's monitoring her social media. The psychological mechanism is using privacy preferences to maintain strategic ambiguity. By claiming she doesn't post relationship content, she avoids creating evidence while ensuring her social media suggests availability. The other man can scroll through her Instagram and see nothing suggesting she's in a committed relationship with you, just as you can scroll and see nothing suggesting him. Both of you accepting her explanation that she values privacy while she actually values the ambiguity that lets two relationships exist without digital collision. The long-term impact is realizing her private social media was actually carefully curated to hide your relationship from him and his from you. Every time she asked you not to tag her, she was protecting his perception. Every cropped photo that removed you ensured he didn't see evidence. Every vague caption about good times could apply to either relationship without confirming either. While you respected her privacy, she was managing digital presence to ensure neither man could use social media to discover the other. You weren't dating someone who valued privacy. You were dating someone who weaponized privacy to maintain dual relationships that would have immediately collapsed if either man had seen digital evidence of the parallel relationship existing simultaneously. Trick 6. The preemptive narrative control. My ex won't leave me alone. This trick involves creating explanatory narratives early in each relationship that account for any potential evidence that might surface. She tells you about a crazy ex who might show up, messages from old friends who get inappropriate, or a male friend who has feelings she doesn't return. These preemptive stories create context that protects her if evidence surfaces. If you see messages from him, she's already explained he's the persistent ex. If he sees content about you, you're the friend with unrequited feelings. She's writing the story before you can interpret the evidence. The deception works because these narratives sound like transparency. She's warning you about complications in her life and potential drama you might encounter. But the trap is that these aren't warnings about legitimate complications. They're insurance policies. By labeling the other man preemptively, she controls how you'll interpret any evidence of him before you encounter it. You're less likely to investigate the crazy ex because she's already framed him as insignificant. Notice whether her explanatory stories have unusual timing or feel preemptive rather than responsive. Did she tell you about the persistent ex before you had reason to ask, or in response to something specific that happened? Does she mention complications that haven't manifested, but that would perfectly explain evidence that might surface? If she's establishing narratives before problems appear, she's preparing cover stories rather than dealing with actual situations. Watch whether these explained complications actually resolve or remain permanent background characters. Does the ex who won't leave her alone eventually fade away? Or does he remain a persistent presence that requires ongoing explanation? Do the messages from the inappropriate friend stop after she establishes boundaries? Or do they continue indefinitely? If the complications never resolve, despite her claiming to address them, they're not complications. They're the other relationship requiring ongoing explanation. Pay attention to whether evidence matches the narrative when you encounter it. If you see messages from the ex, do they actually sound like someone who won't accept rejection, or do they sound like ongoing intimate conversation? If you meet the friend with feelings, Does he actually act inappropriate around her, or do they interact like an established couple? When evidence appears, does it confirm her narrative or contradict it in ways she explains away by claiming he's deceptive, manipulative, or that things are complicated? The psychological mechanism is controlling interpretation through preemptive framing. By labeling the other man before you discover him, she ensures you'll interpret evidence through her provided context rather than drawing accurate conclusions. You're not investigating the suspicious messages because she already explained who he is and why he's contacting her, except the explanation was designed specifically to prevent investigation that would reveal the messages aren't from an ex, but from her current other boyfriend. The long-term impact is discovering that every preemptive explanation was calculated protection against evidence she knew might surface. The crazy ex who won't leave her alone was her other boyfriend. The inappropriate friend was actually a full relationship she labeled platonic to you while labeling you as the friend with feelings to him. Every story she told, establishing background complications, was designed to prevent accurate interpretation of evidence. When you finally encounter him and realize the messages you saw weren't harassment from a rejected ex, but intimate communication from a current boyfriend, you'll understand that months of narratives about complications were actually months of deliberate framing designed to ensure neither man investigated evidence that would have revealed the simultaneous relationships both of you believed were exclusive.